Picture this. You're leaning forward on a steep hill, shoes slipping, fingers burning. The cart behind you is heavy, dead weight. You pull, it doesn't move. You pull again. Your breath gets loud, your back tightens. Minutes turn into hours. You're still in the same spot, nurses staring at the ground, asking a quiet question you don't want to say out loud. Why is this so hard for me? Now notice something uncomfortable. A few steps away, someone else faces the same hill, same cart, same load. No advantage you can see at first glance, but he doesn't grab the wood with his bare hands. He stops. He adjusts something simple, a small system. One pull and the cart lifts, not fast, not magically, just forward. What crushed you barely slows him down. This hits closer than it should, because you've been that first person, trying harder, staying later, telling yourself that pain must mean progress. And when nothing changes, you don't question the setup. You question yourself. Maybe I'm lazy. Maybe I'm not disciplined enough. Maybe everyone else just wants it more. That belief feels honest. It also keeps you stuck. Try a different frame for a moment. Not a belief, an experiment. What if effort isn't the problem? What if effort is neutral and the direction is wrong? Same work, same hours. One turns into motion, the other turns into fatigue. Essential versus noise. Forward force versus wasted burn. Here's the part no one likes to admit. Working hard is comfortable. It's familiar. It gives you moral cover. You can say, at least I tried. Changing how you work is riskier. It exposes the possibility that you've been pushing the wrong way for a long time. But there's something practical hidden here, something you can test, not worship, a way to make the same pull matter more, a way to stop confusing suffering with progress. You don't need motivation for it. You need awareness. So hold this question without answering it yet. If two people apply the same effort, why does only one move? What invisible factor turns strain into distance? And why were you never trained to look for it? Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And what comes next isn't about working harder. It's about deciding whether you keep pulling with your hands or finally change the mechanism. Think back to school. The room was quiet, lights buzzing. You stayed late to finish the assignment while others left. Teachers smiled. Parents nodded. Work harder. That was the rule. Put in more hours. Push through. And one day it will pay off. You believed it. You built your identity around it. Then real life starts to feel off. Look closely at who actually works the longest. Fields at sunrise, concrete at noon, a steering wheel at midnight, feet swelling in hospital corridors. These people don't talk about hustle. They just move. All day, every day. If effort alone worked, they would be untouchable by now. But they aren't. That realization stings more than it should because it forces a quiet comparison. You notice someone else. Fewer hours. Cleaner hands. More control. Meetings instead of lifting. Decisions instead of repetition. One signature does more than a month of sweat. Same week, same world. Completely different outcomes. This is where discomfort creeps in, not anger, confusion. Because no one told you this part. No one said that effort can be real and still go nowhere. That you can give everything and only receive survival in return. So let's pause the story and shift the lens. Not a conclusion, a test. What if hard work isn't wrong, just incomplete? Same energy, different placement. One feeds the system, the other bends it, freedom versus comfort, motion versus progress. Here's the practical edge hiding underneath. If effort were enough, aging wouldn't scare you, but it does. Because time exposes the deal you're actually in. When your body slows down, the culture that praised your grind quietly replaces you. Younger, cheaper, less worn, no ceremony. And when that thought lands, most people turn inward. They don't question the structure. They question themselves. Not disciplined enough, not smart enough, not lucky enough. Guilt settles in. Heavy, familiar, convenient for everyone except you. But hold this open for a moment. If the hardest workers are the easiest to replace, what does that say about the rule you were taught to live by? And if effort alone leads to exhaustion, what else has been quietly deciding who rises and who stays stuck? We're not answering that yet. Because once you see the pattern clearly, the next step isn't motivation, it's strategy. And that changes everything that comes next. Here's the part that should make you pause. You know what? You didn't fall behind because you're lazy. You didn't lose because you lacked discipline. You lost because you were trained to fight with your hands in a world that runs on machines. You were handed effort. No one handed you leverage. That's uncomfortable to hear because it means the pain was real, but the rules were hidden. You can pull all day and still stay in the same place if the ground beneath you never moves. Try a small experiment in your head. Imagine pushing a wall with your palms. Muscles tight, breath shallow. You move nothing. Now imagine using a simple tool, same body, same strength. The wall shifts, not because you changed, but because the method did. This isn't about strength versus weakness. It's bare hands versus mechanisms, linear force versus multiplied force, comfort in effort versus freedom in setup. You've seen this pattern before, even if you didn't name it. Some actions burn energy and end there. Others echo. 1 hour in, 1 hour out. Or one decision that keeps working while you sleep. Same world. Two completely different trajectories. Here's where it gets practical. Leverage isn't mystical. It's anything that allows one action to travel further than your body can. Something that keeps pushing after you stop. Something that doesn't ask for your presence every time it works. And this is where most people hesitate because leverage feels unfair at first. It looks like cheating, like skipping steps. But ask yourself this quietly. Is it more honest to exhaust yourself or to build something that doesn't require your exhaustion? Hold that thought. Because leverage doesn't always look like a machine. Sometimes it looks like words written once that keep shaping minds long after the writer is gone. Sometimes it looks like a system that repeats your effort instead of consuming it. Sometimes it looks like a signal that spreads faster than you can move. We're not naming all of it yet. That would close the loop too early. What matters right now is the shift. From trying harder to placing effort where it multiplies. From noise to essential, from motion to reach. So ask yourself this, and don't rush the answer. If effort isn't the missing piece, what is quietly amplifying the lives of others? While yours depends entirely on how hard you can push today? Because once you see that difference clearly, the next step isn't more work. It's choosing where your work is allowed to travel. And that's where the real change begins. Watch how nothing meaningful ever moves alone. One voice speaks, another carries it. One mind sparks, another shapes it. Every shift you admire was shared before it was seen. Ideas don't survive in isolation. They break, they fade. But when a direction passes through other people, it hardens into force. This lands personally if you're honest. You've tried to do everything yourself. Hold it all, carry it quietly. And it feels noble until it feels fragile. One bad week and everything stops. One setback and the whole structure collapses because it lived only inside you. So let's risk a different frame. Not a belief, a test. What if strength isn't independence but transmission, alone versus multiplied? A goal held privately versus a direction carried by others. Notice the pattern. Movements don't grow from effort alone. They grow from alignment, when others act without being pushed, When momentum no longer depends on your presence, that's when effort stops leaking and starts compounding. Now here's an uncomfortable cut. Money shows up here too. Assets, capital. Yes, it can extend reach. But watch closely. Without direction, without inner order, it doesn't free you. It just tightens the leash. More options, less meaning, comfort without control. So pause. Because leverage isn't about getting richer. That's the shallow version. The useful version is about extension. About letting what matters to you move beyond your body, beyond your time, beyond your energy. Noise versus essence, survival versus continuity. There's a practical promise hidden here. When effort can travel through systems, people, structures, it stops dying at the end of your day. It keeps going, quietly, without applause, without permission. This raises a dangerous question. If leverage matters this much, why was it never explained to you early on? Why were you taught discipline, obedience, endurance, but not multiplication? Look closely at the environment you were trained in. Bells telling you when to move, rules rewarding compliance, mistakes punished, repetition praised. A rhythm designed for reliability, not reach, consistency, not scale. This isn't conspiracy, it's architecture. Workers are predictable, multipliers are not, so hold the loop open. If effort isn't the limit and money isn't the core, what actually allows a life to outlast itself? And if the system never planned to teach you that, where would you even start looking? Because once you see what was omitted, the next move isn't rebellion, it's precision. And that's where the real shift begins. Watch the pattern closely. Bells ring. Shifts begin. Shifts end. You move when told. You stop when told. This isn't preparation for freedom. It's preparation for a line, a place where timing matters more than thought, and repetition matters more than reach. You felt it early, even if you couldn't name it. Struggle was praised. Exhaustion was framed as honor. If your body broke down, it meant you cared. If you kept going anyway, you were called virtuous. That story settles deep because it sounds moral. Here's the discomfort. That morality isn't about dignity, it's about predictability, obedience dressed up as character, endurance sold as meaning. Work hard or don't ask why. Accept your position and call it noble. Try shifting the frame for a moment, not an argument, an experiment. Look at two people in the same system. One spends 12 hours a day driving, watching the clock, counting miles, bills get paid. Barely. Tomorrow looks exactly like today. Now look at the one who never touches the wheel. He designed the platform. His day doesn't repeat. It multiplies. Same industry, same demand, completely different outcomes. This is where it gets uncomfortable again. The driver works harder. The builder scales harder. Effort versus leverage. Motion versus expansion. There's something practical hiding here. Linear work has a limit. You trade time for output. 1 hour in, 1 hour back. If you want more, you give more. More sweat, more wear. But the day doesn't stretch. The body doesn't negotiate. Eventually you hit a wall. Ask yourself this quietly. If leverage changes everything so completely, why was it never explained to you early on? Why were you taught discipline, endurance, compliance, but not multiplication? Because that omission isn't random. A system that runs on compliant labor can't encourage too many people to step off the script. If you understood leverage early, you wouldn't settle for scraps. You wouldn't rent out your life by the hour without resistance. You'd start asking different questions, dangerous ones. Hold this open. Hard work keeps you moving. Leverage decides where that movement goes. One traps you inside the machine. The other lets you build one. So here's the unfinished thought to carry forward. If effort alone always hits a ceiling, what happens when you stop adding hours and start changing the structure itself? Because once you see that wall clearly, the next step isn't rebellion. It's design. And that's where the real shift is waiting. Notice the difference in motion. One push moves something a little. Another push changes everything. Same force, different result. That's not luck. That's structure. You've felt this gap before. Long days where nothing really changes. Then you see someone else make one move and their impact spreads without them being present. It's unsettling because it suggests the problem was never your willingness to try. Here's the honest discomfort. Effort feels fair. Multiplication feels suspicious. We're taught that inch-by-inch progress is virtuous while leaps look undeserved. But reality doesn't reward virtue. It rewards reach. So shift the frame for a moment. Not a belief, a test. Imagine one idea spoken once, then forgotten. Now imagine the same idea written down, shared, repeated by others who never met its source. Same thought, two completely different lifespans. Effort versus echo. This is where things turn practical. Leverage flips the math. Work alone moves forward only while you push. Leverage moves while you sleep. One depends on your body, the other leaves your body behind and enters systems, tools, and other minds. You've seen this pattern play out across time. One man asks questions in a public square. Alone, he's noise. Those questions are carried forward by students, written down, argued over, taught again. Centuries pass. The voice is gone. The influence isn't. One life ends. The motion continues. The same thing happens with movements. One voice speaks. It matters for a moment. But when that voice is picked up by thousands of others who walk, refuse, repeat, and act, it becomes something else entirely. Not louder effort, wider reach. And it happens with creation too. One mind sketches, experiments, crosses boundaries instead of staying in a single lane. The work spills outward. Painters borrow from it, engineers study it, thinkers return to it long after the hand that drew the lines is gone. Here's the sharp line. Effort stops when you stop. Leverage doesn't ask for permission to continue. Comfort versus freedom. Burnout versus endurance. This explains something people avoid saying out loud. Rewards don't follow fairness, they follow amplification. A small number of actions capture most of the value because they travel. A book read by millions. A design reused endlessly. A lesson passed from one generation to the next. So the question quietly changes shape. It's no longer about how much you can give today. It's about what keeps giving when you're no longer there. And that question stays open for a reason. Because once you start asking it seriously, the next step isn't more effort. It's deciding what kind of force you're trying to create. And that's where the real shift is still waiting. Look at your hands for a moment. Imagine them wrapped around oars. You pull. Water resists. The boat moves a little. You pull again. Same result. Hour after hour. Progress measured in inches. Now picture a different scene. You're standing still, adjusting a single point of contact. One push. The weight shifts. Not because you're stronger, but because the setup changed. That question lands uncomfortably close. What have you actually built? Endless strokes or a fulcrum? Here's the hard part to admit. Linear effort feels productive. It keeps you busy, tired, justified. Exponential effort feels suspicious, quiet, almost lazy from the outside. Yet only one of them moves a life forward instead of in circles. So let's treat this like an experiment, not a belief. If leverage matters this much, why do so many people ignore it? Why do millions double down on grinding, convinced the next push will finally free them? One illusion hides the answer. You hear the stories of the few who made it. They say they just worked harder than everyone else. It sounds clean, inspiring. What you don't hear about are the doors that were already open, the timing that aligned, the networks that carried their effort further than their arms ever could. You see the survivor and copy the visible struggle. You never see the millions who matched that effort and disappeared because nothing multiplied it. Another illusion cuts deeper. We've been trained to trust pain. If something hurts, it must be meaningful. If it drains you, it must be worthy. So anything that looks efficient triggers suspicion. Shortcuts are shameful. Systems feel dishonest. Strategy feels like cheating. But pause. A pulley doesn't insult the weight. It respects physics. Without it, the lift doesn't become noble. It becomes impossible. Still, culture whispers otherwise. It praises the runner, not the one who built the track. It glorifies motion, not direction. From classrooms to offices to screens glowing late at night, the rhythm is the same. Work harder, aim higher, consume, repeat. The wheel spins. The runner sweats. Nothing actually changes. Here's the quiet discomfort. The people who benefit most from the wheel are rarely inside it. They're watching it turn. So keep this open. If effort alone keeps you moving but never arriving, what would happen if you stopped asking how much harder you can push and started asking what you're pushing against? Because once that question takes hold, the next step isn't motivation, it's design. And that's where things finally begin to shift. Picture a week that never really ends. 60 hours, emails at night, deadlines stacked on top of each other, dinners missed, body tense. He tells himself it's temporary, that this sacrifice means something. Somewhere else, another man spends a few quiet weekends writing a piece of code. No rush, no applause. Months later, that code is everywhere, running on machines he's never seen, used by people he'll never meet. Pause there. Which one actually moved forward? That comparison stings because it's too close to home. You've been the first person more often than you want to admit. Busy, needed, tired, and secretly afraid that if you stop, everything collapses. Here's the uncomfortable truth hiding underneath. Pain flatters the ego. It whispers that your suffering makes you worthy, but suffering by itself doesn't liberate you. Sweat, without multiplication, just keeps the machine fed. Until you see that, you can run faster and still fall behind, so shift the frame. Not a belief, a test. What if progress isn't about how much you give, but about how far your actions travel? Effort versus reach, motion versus consequence. This matters because leverage has a dark side too. Some people discover it and chase only the surface rewards. Money, status, the appearance of winning, and suddenly their work spreads, but it spreads nothing of value. Noise instead of meaning. Distraction instead of truth. So here's the practical turn. Leverage alone isn't the goal. Direction is. Before asking how to multiply, you have to ask what you're multiplying. Essence versus excess. Freedom versus a louder cage. Start small. Ask what pulls you when no one is watching. What kind of problems hold your attention without force? For some, it's healing. For others, teaching, creating, building, questioning. This isn't branding, it's orientation. Without it, any tool you touch will wander. Then comes the harder part. Craft. The slow sharpening of skill. The patience to get better when no one is counting the hours. This is where discipline actually belongs, not in endless labor, but in depth. Because when reach arrives, it doesn't ask what you intended, it only amplifies what's already there. This is where many get it backward. They hunt platforms first, systems first, shortcuts first, and end up multiplying mediocrity at scale. Hold the loop open here. Once direction is clear and skill is real, leverage stops being dangerous and starts becoming precise. Tools, systems, platforms that carry your work beyond your body, beyond your time. So the question shifts again, not how hard can you push, not how fast can you grow, but what part of you is worth extending, and what structure It will let it keep moving when you're no longer the one pushing. Because the moment you answer that, the real work finally begins. Look closely at how different paths actually travel. Someone writes a lesson once, late at night, unsure if anyone will read it. Years pass. That lesson keeps teaching people the writer will never meet. Another person records a short explanation, presses upload, walks away. The words keep moving while they sleep. Same effort, different reach. That hits personally if you're honest. You've poured energy into moments that vanished. The second you stopped showing up, you felt useful, needed, and still replaceable. Here's the discomfort. Leverage doesn't create meaning. It exposes whether meaning was there to begin with. It doesn't save you from emptiness. It multiplies whatever you're already carrying. So shift the frame again, not a belief, an experiment. Imagine care that stays locked inside one pair of hands. Then imagine that same care, taught, documented, passed on. One version ends with you, the other keeps working. Presence versus propagation. Comfort versus continuity. This is where it becomes practical. If your pull is toward teaching, words are tools. A book, a course, a video, one effort, long lifespan. If your pull is toward healing, knowledge compounds. One insight shared becomes many recoveries you'll never witness. If your pull is toward creating, distribution matters. A single piece exists once. A shared piece becomes a reference, a signal others return to. Even leadership changes shape here. Control feels powerful in the moment, but it traps everything inside you. Empowerment looks slower at first, less impressive, until others begin to carry the direction without asking. One path shrinks, the other multiplies. Notice the pattern underneath all of this. Leverage never gives direction, it only amplifies it. No compass and you wander faster. No craft and you scale weakness. That's why alignment comes first. Direction gives weight to effort. Skill gives it credibility. Only then does leverage stop being dangerous and start being precise. Essence versus noise. Endurance versus burnout. Here's what was quietly withheld from you. You don't have to trade meaning for efficiency. You don't have to abandon virtue to gain reach. That's a false choice that keeps people small. The real path is integration. Know what pulls you, sharpen it patiently. Then let systems carry it farther than your body ever could. Hard work still matters. It tempers you. It grounds you. But by itself, it only moves what you're touching. Inches at a time. Hold this open. What part of you deserves to keep moving after you step away? And what structure would let that happen without demanding your constant presence? Because when you answer that, honestly, effort stops being a cage. It becomes fuel. And that's when your work finally starts to outlive you. Imagine the sound of dirt scraping under your nails, day after day, same hole, same depth. Your hands are raw, your back tightens. You tell yourself it's honest work, that if you just keep going, water will come. It never does. Your strength runs out first. Now hold a second image. Someone else pauses. He doesn't rush. He studies the ground. Builds something simple, a wheel, a rope, a bucket. He digs less. But water rises, he drinks. His family drinks, others gather. Years later, long after he's gone, the wheel still turns. That contrast is uncomfortable because it feels familiar. You've been praised for digging with your hands, for staying busy, for proving your effort with pain. And part of you is proud of that. Here's the risk in saying this out loud. Pride can trap you. Sweat feels moral. Strategy feels suspicious. But exhaustion is not legacy. It's just exhaustion. So change the frame for a moment. Not a lesson, a test. What if freedom doesn't come from adding hours, but from changing the mechanism? Bare hands versus a wheel, noise versus structure. This isn't about quitting work, it's about choosing where your work lives. One path keeps you running inside a loop, convinced the next push will be different. The other asks a harder question first. What lasts when I stop pushing? There's a practical promise hidden here. When you build something that carries your direction forward, effort stops dying at the end of the day. It spreads, it feeds others, it creates room to breathe. So let the question stay open. Will you keep pulling, proud and tired, measuring life by how much it hurts? Or will you step back long enough to build something that lifts more than just you? Because once you see the wheel, you can't unsee it. And once you step outside the script, the work ahead isn't louder or faster, it's deeper, and it's just beginning.